All right, lock in. This is one of the craziest UK drill stories ever. It starts in Camden, where two young rappers came up out of the same gritty blocks, grinding through the same struggles, dodging feds, and chasing the same dream. At first, it looked like they were on the same side. One had just come home from jail, and the other looked out. The guy literally gave him clothes and money, real love. That was Chinx from OS and Suspect from Active Gang. But not long after, Suspect flipped, fully repping AG his gang, turning on the very person who held him down. From there, it turned savage. We're talking real-life ambushes, attempted hits, and diss tracks so violent the police literally had the tracks removed and banned from the internet. With these leaks so rare that you have people trying to pay thousands of dollars to buy them off of each other. These two went from being tight to trying to end each other's careers and lives. I've been following this for 5 years, and I can finally make a video on it, so pay attention because no one has covered this like you're about to see. And we go deep in lyrics, background lore, and hidden secret stories that I managed to get before they were taken down. I'm talking about those stories that only stay up for 24 hours. Let's get into how it all fell apart. Chapter 1, Same Block, Different Gangs. All right, so listen up. Both these men are from Camden in North London. And when I say they're from the same area, I mean you can literally walk from one's block to the others in like 10 minutes. But in street terms, that 10-minute walk might as well be a different planet, you get me? Chinx, real name Derek Pinto, was repping OS, which means one side, and they claim Cumberland Market around Regent's Park Estate. Meanwhile, Suspect, government name Tariq Montero, was running with Active Gang from Agar Grove Estate. Now check this, these estates are so close to each other that these men probably went to the same shops, saw each other around, maybe even knew some of the same people. But because of where they happened to live, they ended up on completely opposite sides. What gets me is how their stories are basically the same in the beginning. Chinx was born in 1995, Suspect came along in February 2000, so there's like 5 years between them. But both of them grew up in the same type of environment where if you're a young black man trying to do something with your life, everybody's already watching you like you're up to no good. Both of them got into music early, both saw drill as their way out, and both ended up with the police treating them like they were public enemy number one. Here's where it gets really crazy though. Chinx got caught up in some firearms case that had him locked away for 4 whole years. From 2017 to 2021. 4 years, bro. That's basically your entire early 20s gone. The time when most artists are building their fan base and getting their sound together. While Chinx was doing his bid, Suspect was out here building his reputation and becoming one of the biggest names in drill. Now, that's not to say that Suspect was clean by any means. After this, go check out my other videos on him because this guy was a literal demon. But let's just say that he chased a literal child in a car, chasing him through an alleyway with a knife while laughing. But keep watching first to see the stories and evidence. Suspect was really that guy back then, no cap. His track, The Hotspot, was hitting different. And when he did his Plugged In with Fumes the Engineer, that joint nearly hit 10 million streams. 10 million. Tracks like Way Too Charged and Turn Up were pulling 4 million each. The boy was straight up cold with it, and he was barely out of his teens. Now pay attention to the lore. Suspect was associated with someone named Too Smoky, who was also a part of Active Gang. They both released a track on Plugged In that went mega viral, but just remember the name Too Smoky for now. So imagine this, Chinx comes home in 2021 after 4 years away, and everything's changed. Drill went mainstream, the police are even more pressed than before, and there's new man running the scene. You know how that must have felt? Like you go away thinking you're gonna come back and pick up where you left off, but now your spot's taken and everybody's moved on. But the problem was, his spot was taken by the people he hated most. But Chinx wasn't about to just disappear though. This man had been writing bars for 4 years straight, thinking about flows, planning his comeback. When he dropped Secrets Not Safe in 2022, you could tell he hadn't lost nothing. The track was hitting, raw and real in a way that only someone who's really been through it can deliver. Before Chinx even dropped his first track though, he dropped Instagram freestyles where people were already seeing that this guy had potential, with some viewers commenting that Active Gang fanboys would take it down while others were saying that he needed a feature right away. But back to his newly dropped track, with some never hearing about who Chinx was, 99.9% of people listening thought it was just another rapper that came onto the scene with some heat. But for that 0.1%, the lyrics went crazy. In his track, Chinx directly called out Suze with lines saying, "Ask Suze if he's seen that smoke," where he directly calls out Suspect, challenging him if he was really about that life, since Suspect made tracks talking about how he would run down ops, with other lyrics saying, "How you link me after 2 of your mates got smoked. It seems like you ain't that close. How many times has Seuss been jail and he came out broke? I bought man clothes and I gave man dough. Where he allegedly claimed that Suspect tried to chill with him after his side allegedly got Suspect's mates dropped, suggesting that he was snaky and wasn't close to his friends, and saying that when Suspect went to prison and came out, he was broke and that he gave him some clothes and money to get him back into his life. With other lines saying, "Too Smoky got splashed, he was lacking, I heard I got splashed in the chest, but I don't recall that, that's how it happened," which referenced how Too Smoky got attacked, while the claims saying that Chinx got stabbed were not true, to which he later posted proof after the song showing that he had no scars on his chest on his Snapchat. If y'all didn't know, Too Smoky was also a rapper, and to most, he was actually one of the most talented, hardest, and most unique artists that has ever come into the game. So powerful that one of his songs, when it leaked, became a literal sensation across the drill community because it has been gatekept for years while Too Smoky quit for personal reasons, trying to stay out of the scene due to religious reasons, respectable of course. And even later, Chinx reposted a post of Too Smoky on his Instagram account showing respect for his decision. But back to Chinx, what you gotta understand is that in his track, he was actually replying to Suspect's previous diss before Chinx released any music in the first place. In Suspect's plugged-in track, his lyrics said it went through his chest and come out his back, where he was claiming that he stabbed Chinx in the chest. Now just try to imagine how deep this lore was, because again, Chinx had literally no tracks released and he was sitting in prison. Right after Chinx dropped his track, Suspect was silent for a bit, and Chinx immediately saw that he wasn't responding. He took to Snapchat to call him out, saying that the man that always has something to say has nothing to say now, lol, hashtagging the title of his track Secrets Not Safe. But don't think that Suspect had nothing to say to Chinx on the gram. Later, when Chinx would go on to release his first album, Suspect posted on his story saying, quote, "I'm glad to be an inspiration," saying that Chinx was just looking up to Suspect for inspiration. But catch this, back in 2015, here is Chinx on Twitter saying to free Suspect when he was locked up in jail for crimes he committed. The thing you gotta also understand about UK drill rap is that the community goes crazy, with most of the drill rappers and artists back in the day using Snapchat to call each other out, whether it was going on their ops block and trying to find them all the way to posting some funny stuff. Not gonna lie, it was and still is one of the most entertaining stuff to watch and to keep up to date with. Like, just watch this clip real quick that leaked recently.
Put your phone down! You pussy!
I'll put my phone down, mate.
You see him? You pussy!
I'm scared, mate.
Yeah, you are.
Of some rapper that went to his ops mom's house to try to find where her son was. Now, if you want some more, you heard of Plugged In. Yeah, so it's a studio or type of set that all rappers try to get on because of how popular it was back in the day, with Fumez, the engineer, bringing on rappers and having their tracks aired on his partner network. But the crazy thing is that literal enemies would go on to the same Plugged In to release their own tracks against each other. And that was exactly what Chinx did, where he also denied that Suspect ever stabbed him in the chest. But Fumez would always be neutral, if you know what I mean, just being there to give these guys a spotlight to go at each other. But whether it was entertainment or real beef, take it however you want. The thing is, despite both of them hating each other, they were actually dealing with the same enemy, the police. The feds weren't just watching their music, they were actively trying to get their stuff removed from YouTube, Spotify, everywhere. We talking about a level of hate that would blow your mind. That track, Secrets Not Safe, actually got taken down by the Metropolitan Police just after 4 days. But Chinx's first track literally got over 1.5 million streams. And this wasn't no cheap production. If y'all could find the track and watch it, the quality is fire. Even at one point a while back, Chinx made an Instagram story saying that he had to notify the feds before he would release any tracks, saying that he couldn't encourage or express any violence through his tracks, with some people saying that he should go bait face, meaning to release tracks under another identity basically. People basically just wanted to hear what he had to release and to keep the lore going. But you don't know if some people were serious, but this was what was hot at the time. But while they're both fighting the same system, there's this tension building between them that goes way deeper than just music. See, when Chinx went away, OS was still trying to make their mark in drill. They weren't the big players they are now. But by the time he came back, both OS and Active Gang had proper established themselves, built up their street cred, and developed real beef that went beyond just competitive rap. Chapter 2, when it got personal. So check it. While Chinx was locked up and Suspect was blowing up, something was brewing in Camden that made everything way more serious. The beef between OS and Active GXNG started getting really personal, really dangerous, and really messy. The thing about Camden is it's not like other places where different crews are spread far apart. These estates are literally on top of each other. Cumberland Market, where OS operates, and Agar Grove, where Active Gang is based, are so close that beef is basically inevitable. We talking about young men who might have gone to the same schools, bought food from the same shops and corner stores, knew the same people, but ended up enemies because of which block they happened to be born on. What made it even crazier is how both crews were using drill music to document their beef in real time. This wasn't just entertainment, this was like street news set to music. Every track was basically a report from the front lines, and both Chinx and Suspect were becoming the main voices for their sides. When Suspect dropped tracks talking about his area and his life, he wasn't just rapping. He was representing for Active Gang and everyone from Agar Grove who felt like they were under attack. His delivery was raw, aggressive, no filter. The boy wasn't holding back nothing, talking about real situations and real people in a way that had everyone paying attention. Meanwhile, Chinx was dealing with his own problems. Coming out after 4 years changes you, and you could hear it in his music. There was hunger there, but also wisdom that comes from being forced to sit with your thoughts for that long. His approach was different from Suspect's, more calculated, more strategic, but just as intense. The personal side of their beef wasn't just about territory, though. It was about respect, about who really represented Camden Drill, about who earned their stripes and who was just making noise. Chinx had the older head credibility, the experience of going through the system and coming out still dedicated to his music. Suspect had the youth, the current relevance, and the numbers to back up his claims about being the voice of his generation. What's crazy is how both of them were dealing with the same outside pressure while building this inside tension. The police were watching every move, social media was documenting every little thing, and fans were picking sides like this was some kind of football rivalry instead of real people's lives. You could see it in how they carried themselves, how they talked about their music, how they referenced their areas. Every interview, every social media post, every feature was another chance to stake their claim and throw shots. It wasn't always direct. Sometimes it was just the way they'd say certain words or make references that only people from their ends would understand. The thing that made it even more complicated is how both of these artists were genuinely talented. This wasn't just about street politics, both of them could really rap. Chinx had this technical ability and storytelling skill that came from years of perfecting his craft. I know it may sound corny, but even with this being drill rap, they were talented, and for Chinx, including those 4 years when writing was probably one of the only things keeping him sane. Suspect had this natural, raw talent and intensity that connected with listeners straight away. There's almost no one saying Suspect's tracks are washed, it's always straight bars. But talent alone wasn't enough to keep them out of trouble. Actually, their talent made them bigger targets, both for the police and for each other. The better they got, the more attention they drew, and the more dangerous their situation became. Like, imagine being so good at something that it literally puts your life at risk. That's what these men were dealing with every day. Every bar they wrote, every video they shot, every show they performed could potentially be used against them in court or put them in danger on the streets. For the fans, it was devastating in a way. Like, imagine you're bumping tracks of your favorite rapper or listening to a music video that just came out, and before you know it, the literal track is taken down and you didn't even get to download the music video or any tracks. And the people who did kept gatekeeping it or just didn't care enough to share it with the rest of the community. Chapter 3, The Feds. But yo, this is where things get absolutely mental, because while Chinx and Suspect were building their beef, the Metropolitan Police were building their own war against drill music in general. We talking about surveillance and interference that nobody in the scene had ever seen before. In 2022, the same year Chinx dropped Secrets Not Safe, the police made moves that changed everything for drill artists. They weren't just watching anymore. They were actively working to get content banned, and both Chinx and Suspect found themselves right in the middle of this crackdown. The police literally went to social media platforms with a list of 286 videos they wanted removed. 286. And guess what? Every single one was drill music. Not grime, not UK rap, specifically drill. They were targeting the exact genre that Chinx and Suspect had put everything into, trying to kill the movement that had given them a voice. Now, don't get it twisted. You might think some rappers like Central C would get affected, but Central C used to be a drill artist before he changed his sound to go mainstream. But many OG fans and supporters thought he was a sellout, so they supported other rappers that kept it real to their roots like Digga D. But for Central C, that new sound found a new audience, and a lot of fans understood that this was what was better for him, but that's for another story. For Chinx, this was devastating because he was just trying to get his career back on track. Secrets Not Safe was supposed to be his comeback track, his way of showing people that those 4 years didn't break him. The song was doing numbers, getting real traction, and then boom, the Fed stepped in and had it removed. What made it even more frustrating is that the track wasn't even that crazy compared to other drill content out there. But because it was Chinx, because he had history, because OS was on their radar, it got targeted. The message was clear. They didn't want him to have a platform no matter how talented he was or what his rights were supposed to be. The censorship didn't stop with just removing videos, though. The police were pressuring venues not to book drill artists, working with streaming platforms to suppress drill content, and basically trying to make it impossible for artists like Chinx and Suspect to make money from their music. This outside pressure actually made the tensions between different drill crews even worse, because now everyone was fighting for the limited space that was left. If the feds were going to make it harder for all drill artists to succeed, then the competition between OS and Active Gang became even more serious. Suspect was dealing with his own police troubles that would eventually change everything. While Chinx was fighting censorship, Suspect was facing way more serious charges. In January 2022, just as his career was really taking off, he got arrested in Kenya and brought back to the UK to face murder charges. The timing was absolutely brutal. This was a young man who had gone from being nobody to being one of the biggest names in drill in just a couple years. His plugged-in freestyle was still getting views, his songs were still in rotation, and fans were still waiting for his next project. Then suddenly, he's facing life in prison. What made it even more tragic is how his arrest played into all the things the police and media had been saying about drill music. They were saying drill artists were just criminals using music to document their crimes. And here was one of the scene's biggest stars getting charged with murder. For Chinx, Suspect's arrest probably felt like proof that his own more careful approach was right. Here was a younger artist who had been more reckless, more open about his lifestyle. And now he was facing the consequences. It was like watching a cautionary tale play out in real time. But it also meant that one of his main rivals was suddenly out of the picture. The tensions between OS and Active Gang didn't disappear, but they definitely shifted when their main voice was locked up waiting for trial. The whole situation showed how dangerous life was for drill artists in general. You could go from having millions of streams to being in handcuffs in a matter of weeks. The same lifestyle that gave you credibility and content for your music could also end your career and your freedom. What's really deep is how both artists handled these outside pressures differently. Chinx became more strategic, more careful about what he said and how he said it. He started working with lawyers and groups to fight the censorship, turning his personal struggle into a bigger fight for artistic freedom. The case around Secrets Not Safe actually became a major legal battle. The Meta Oversight Board, which is like Facebook's Supreme Court, ended up saying that removing his video was wrong. They said police pressure alone wasn't enough reason to censor artistic expression. This was huge, not just for Chinx, but for drill music in general. It set a precedent that platforms couldn't just remove content because the police asked them to. There had to be actual policy violations, actual evidence of harm. But by the time this victory came through, Suspect was already deep in the legal system. In May 2023, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 24 years. At 23 years old, his career was basically over before it really began. Chapter 4, The Aftermath. So here we are in 2025, and everything looks completely different from where we started. Chinx is still out here, still fighting for his place in the drill scene, but operating under constant watch from the police. He's got like 73,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, which is decent, but nowhere near the numbers Suspect was pulling at his peak. While Suspect is still in prison with still somehow having access to a phone and being able to post on the gram, this year he responded to one of Chinx's latest tracks claiming that he caught his last body in 2017, referring to it as Points. And right after his story, Chinx then replied to Suspect. Chinx posted a story, and damn, was this deep. He posted a message saying, "I have no desire to be seen or applauded for my accomplishments in my life by people of minimal importance to my life." And saying how the streets were dangerous and traumatizing, obtaining misery, trauma, PTSD, and a loss of valuable time. He said that he was as rare case where most of the other people that walked the same path as him had nothing to show for it but scars and jail stories. With some friends that were in jail sharing the same cell with their ops, he gave advice for anyone caught up in the streets to have an exit plan and was down to share advice and help others in the same situation. He finished it by saying that if anyone was going to be in the streets, that they should make some bread and invest it correctly, likely referencing to the exit plan once more. The thing about Chinx's position now is that he's become like an elder in drill, not because of his age, but because of everything he's been through. He's been to prison, he's fought censorship, he's seen careers rise and fall, and he's still here. That gives him a different kind of respect than the young artists who are just coming up, and he seems to be on the right path, where later as the years passed from him reposting and respecting 2 Smokey's decision, all the way to his recent Instagram story, he for sure is heading in the right direction, with fans respecting his decision, saying it was one of the best responses, showing that Chinx was coming from the right perspective. His 2023 mixtape, One-Sided Story, was like his statement to the world. 17 tracks of him laying out his side of everything that happened, his time inside, the state of the scene, his place in it. The title said it all. This is his story, take it or leave it. What's interesting is how his music has changed. He's still making drill, but there's more layers to it now. You can hear the influence of those 4 years locked up, the legal battles, the constant pressure from police. It's not just street rap anymore. It's like real life set to music. Meanwhile, Suspect's story has become a warning that every drill artist has to think about. Here was someone with real talent, actual commercial potential, and a fan base that was growing fast. But the same lifestyle that gave him content and credibility ended up destroying his career and his freedom. Even locked up though, Suspect's influence is still felt in the scene. Artists still reference him, fans still stream his old music, and his story is part of the legend of UK drill. His Suspicious Activity mixtape, released while he was in prison, showed that even from behind bars, he was still creating, still trying to connect with his audience. The beef between OS and Active Gang hasn't disappeared just because their main voice is locked up. If anything, it's gotten more complicated. Without Suspect as the face of Active Gang, other members have had to step up, and the whole dynamic has shifted. And for Chinx, this creates both opportunities and problems. On one hand, he's facing less direct competition from Suspect specifically. On the other hand, he's now seen as representing the older generation of drill, which can be both good and bad in a genre that's always focused on young artists and what's happening right now. What's really crazy is how both of their stories show the bigger struggles of drill music as a whole. The police interference, the censorship, the way artistic expression gets treated like criminal activity. These aren't just individual problems, they're systematic issues that affect the entire scene. The fact that Chinx won his case against Meta shows that these battles can be won, but they require money, legal knowledge, and persistence that not every artist has. Most drill artists don't have access to the kind of legal help that can take a case all the way to an oversight board. And Suspect's conviction shows what happens when the lifestyle that informs the music crosses over into actual criminal activity. The line between artistic expression and criminal confession gets blurred, and the consequences are severe. Looking at where things stand now, it's clear that both artists' stories are still being written, even though Suspect's freedom to write his own story has been seriously limited. Chinx continues to navigate the complicated relationship between artistic expression and police surveillance, while Suspect's legacy continues to influence new artists who see both his talent and his fate as lessons to learn from. The Camden drill scene that produced both of them continues to evolve, with new artists coming up who have to decide how much of their real lives they're willing to put into their music. The tensions between different areas persist, but they're happening in a context where everyone knows the stakes are higher than ever. What strikes me about both of their journeys is how they represent different paths through the same obstacles. Chinx chose to fight the system legally, using his platform to advocate for artistic freedom while trying to rebuild his career. Suspect chose a more direct approach, living the lifestyle he rapped about until it caught up with him. Neither approach is necessarily right or wrong. They're both responses to the impossible situation that young black men in areas like Camden find themselves in. The music industry offers a potential way out, but it also exposes you to scrutiny and criminalization that can destroy the very opportunities it creates. The beef between them, whether direct or indirect, real or perceived, was always about more than just music. It was about territory, respect, survival, and the right to tell your story on your own terms. Both of them succeeded in getting their voices heard, but at completely different costs. As we look toward the future of UK drill, both Chinx and Suspect's stories serve as crucial reference points. They show the potential and the pitfalls, the talent and the tragedy, the artistic achievement and the human cost of a genre that continues to be one of the most vital and controversial forms of expression in British music. Their tensions may never be fully resolved, but their impact on drill music and on each other's careers is undeniable. They pushed each other, challenged each other, and ultimately became part of each other's stories in ways that go far beyond simple rivalry. That's the real madness of this whole situation. Two talented artists from the same area, dealing with the same pressures, who could have been allies but instead became symbols of everything that's complex and contradictory about drill music and the communities it comes from. Their beef was never just personal. It was political, cultural, and ultimately tragically human. You know what I mean? This whole story just shows how the system is set up to pit young black men against each other instead of letting them work together. Both Chinx and Suspect had the talent to make it out, but the streets, the police, and the circumstances they grew up in made that nearly impossible. One's still fighting, one's locked up for life, and the cycle continues with the next generation. That's the real tragedy of this whole beef. It didn't have to be this way, but the game is rigged from the start. If y'all enjoyed this video, like it up, and make sure to click another box on your screen to watch another video.